Music students, especially beginning composers, are often afraid of parallel fifths, and that is a symptom of how music theory is often taught and understood. Parallel fifths can be great, and there is only one legitimate reason why you'd want to unilaterally rule them out of any music that you're writing. Let me explain. Music theory is not a monolith. If you only pay attention to the rhetoric, you'd be forgiven for thinking that there is one single great big capital M, capital T music theory, and to get its points across, it is taught as though it is prescriptive, not descriptive. That is, taught like what you should do, not a description of what's done in practice. You even see this on YouTube. You'll find stuff like, did so-and-so famous pop artist know music theory? It's like, bro, what theory? It's like asking, did Albert Einstein know science? Like, yeah, sure he did, but maybe not botany. Be more specific. Theory is useful because it teaches us how music actually works. Any music theory worth its salt will be able to explain a certain style of music, like studying the grammar of a language. J.S. Bach did not come down from the mountaintop one day with a 10 commandments of part writing, on which was, thou shalt not write parallel fifths. The idea that parallel fifths are bad comes from the fact that for a long time in the collective European musical style, composers prized the independence of their lines, or succinctly counterpoint. Fifths and octaves have such pure intervallic ratios that having either of them twice in a row makes the two voices sound more like one voice. It's contrary to what the style prized, and music theorists wrote that down. It's descriptive. It described an existing stylistic tendency. Theorists did not come up with the idea that parallel fifths were bad out of thin air. Composers avoided writing them because it did not fit with the musical grammar of writing things like four-part harmony. And that's what music theory really should be about, the study of musical grammar. This isn't to say that theory isn't worth studying at all. Far from it. In fact, it can give you a wonderful framework for analysis. And best of all, studying theory gives you a set of terms that you can use to communicate your ideas with others. But unless you're writing music that's trying to emulate a certain style, or unless you're doing your theory homework where you are asked to follow standard common practice voice leading procedures, I don't see the point in rigorous adherence to any theoretical framework. If you're writing tonal music, that is, if you're following the rules that dominated European music from like 1600 to 1900 or thereabouts, then sure, you should avoid parallel fifths at pretty much all costs. In most cases, Bach had more kids than he ever wrote parallel fifths, but he still wrote some. If you're writing for horns in the pre-valve days, you'll have direct fifths, which are usually also pretty bad, but theorists made the exception here for this voice leading because you couldn't allow horns to do anything if you didn't allow this. And if you're going to the dominant via a German augmented sixth, textbooks will tell you to go through the cadential 6/4, but even Mozart would go directly to the dominant despite the resulting fifths. There are good reasons that composers handled fifths like blocks of plutonium. That parallel sound is so distinct that using them without proper care sticks out like a sore thumb in your texture. But the nuance, the yes but of it all, gets simplified to a blanket prohibition without explaining why. All of which is to say, I see this fear of parallel motion on a weekly basis when teaching private composition lessons. Someone will inevitably say something like, well, I like it, but I can't put that there. That'd be a parallel fifth. And my first thought, whether I verbalize it or not, is, why do you care? What's the harm of having it there if it doesn't sound out of place? If you're actually studying species counterpoint or chorale writing, sure, I'm going to be happy to point out every stylistic misstep, but the only reason to care about it in a piece of music that you're writing is if it sounds weird in context. That's subjective. Doesn't mean that the question's not worth asking. In both of these cases, I'm only talking about mistakes within a given style. Parallel fifths or anything else that breaks the rules of one musical grammar doesn't mean that it can't peacefully exist in another. Debussy is full of parallel harmonies, and nobody's trying to cancel him for his crimes against music theory. Actually, Debussy has kind of the opposite problem. The grammar of his music is so distinctly his own that theorists are only just now getting around to figuring out his music theory. And nobody's out there asking the question of if Debussy knew music theory. His music works. It's coherent, it holds together on the basis of having a unified musical grammar. It's not just all over the place. The question is, how do we best analyze that grammar so we can figure out what the heck Claude was doing? And it involves a lot of parallel motion, let me tell you. I am not saying that you shouldn't care at all about parallel fifths. You should care about them as much as you care about any element in your music. Like anything else in our postmodern musical universe, they are a tool that you can use if you're after a certain sound, and you can make them a part of your musical grammar. Knowing how any given piece of music works will make you a better composer. And the skills involved in your theory homework, searching for and fixing things like parallel fifths, will improve your score reading and your problem-solving skills. And listening to a piece with a critical ear towards its constituent elements is only going to refine both your ears and your brain. It'll help you learn what you do and you don't like. There's just no reason to be afraid of them or think that they are always bad, regardless of context. And that's why you probably should write more of them. Or at least don't be so scared of doing so. I promise they don't bite or carry any infectious diseases.